Hello, everybody. This is Miss Peachy from WCA Biology again, and we are looking at Unit 5, Lesson 9, Cellular Respiration. Now, this part is, you're going to need to understand it a little bit for this lesson, but let's take this one again with a grain of salt because they are going into some um, details of the chemistry of what's happening here that I think is just a little advanced. And so just listen to what I have to say about this, and hopefully you can kind of get a good idea of what we're talking about. But I want you more so to understand the process of cellular respiration, you know, the ins and outs, glycolysis, Krebs cycle, electron transport chain, than this stuff here, because this can be just a bit tricky. So this is basically talking about the chemistry of what's going on. Where does this energy come from? We talked a little bit about sugar, glucose having a high amount of stored energy, that energy is stored in the bonds. So we have chemical bonds that bond different things together, right? We have covalent bonds, we have ionic bonds, and those bonds actually hold energy in them. Kind of like when you stretch a rubber band and it's got potential energy stored in it, and then if you let it go, it'll fly off. Well, the energy is stored in the bonds, and the bonds are essentially the electrons that are kind of combined together within those particular atoms and molecules. Um, so since energy is stored in the bonds, it is only released when bonds are broken. So we have to break bonds in order to be able to release energy. This explains why ADP, adenosine diphosphate, is lower energy than ATP. When we take the ADP and we bond another phosphate group to it, right? The bond itself stores energy. So when we break this bond and release that additional phosphate group, the energy that was stored there holding that phosphate group to the adenosine diphosphate to make ATP or adenosine triphosphate is actually released. And so that's how energy is then stored in molecules. It talks about exothermic reactions. Exothermic reactions are reactions that actually release more energy than go into making the reaction happen. So in order to start the reaction, you need a certain amount of energy that needs to be put into it to start the reaction. So if you have to put a little bit of energy into the reaction to get it going and it releases more than it does than you've put into it, we call that exothermic. It actually makes more energy than it uses. Endothermic reactions are the opposite. They don't talk about those. Those actually will release, you take more energy than they can release. So they're storing energy. Endothermic reactions will store energy. Exothermic reactions will release energy. So it does go into like glycolysis, and in glycolysis, remember you take 2 ATP to get glycolysis going, and then glycolysis releases 4 ATP. So it's releasing more energy than you put into it. Therefore, that is an exothermic reaction, right? Also familiarizing yourself with some of these terms, we have reactants and products. Reactants are like the ingredients and products are what we're producing. Just keeping that in mind as well. And then it goes into another type of reaction called an oxidation reduction reaction. And this is a type of reaction that occurs when electrons are either gained or lost. So a reaction that loses electrons is called an oxidation reaction. A reaction that gains electrons is called a reduction reaction. So it's either oxidation or reduction. And we see electrons being transported in the electron transport chain, right? So when we take those energy carriers and we put them into the electron transport chain, they have more electrons, and then they lose those electrons in the electron transport chain. So they're actually losing electrons, and that energy is being released in order for them to make that water, right? So we have water molecules. They need a lot of energy to be broken apart. They also need a lot of energy to be made. And so we see all of that happening within the electron transport chain as well. That's it. There's a lot more details in that, but I think that kind of gives you the overview of what we're talking about here, how molecules store energy, that in an exothermic reaction, energy is released. Um, so you put in less energy than is actually released in that situation. And oxidation reduction reactions are about releasing and or gaining electrons. And that's what we see happening in respiration. All right, questions or concerns, let me know. But again, understand kind of the overview of this and don't get caught up in the details because those are going to really bog you down here. Uh, see you guys later. If you have any questions, 2204. Have a great day.